On Jerusalem Dateline, exciting discoveries bring the book of Judges alive at the excavation site at ancient Shiloh. See the emerging walls of the tabernacle and the Holy of Holies, which sheltered the Ark of the Covenant. And we'll hear about the discoveries made this season. All this and more coming up on this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We're here at Shiloh, where the team is uncovering biblical history year after year. But before we hear about this season's new discoveries, let's check out the latest from our Jerusalem news desk. The terror group's missiles, rockets, and drones set fires on the Golan Heights and near the Sea of Galilee. Hezbollah launched the barrage after Israel assassinated one of its top commanders, whose ultimate goal was to conquer Jerusalem. Hezbollah is promising more attacks.
The series of responses is ongoing and will continue targeting new sites the enemy never imagined would be hit.
The ongoing assault could lead Israel to launch an all-out war on Hezbollah to enable some 80,000 residents who've been evacuated to return to northern Israel.
We know there is still a long way to go, but we are determined to restore security to the north and return the residents safely to their homes.
As war inches closer, both Hezbollah and its patron Iran are threatening to obliterate Israel. Netanyahu issuing this strong response.
We established a principle. Whoever harms us is marked for death. We put it into practice.
As for the ongoing conflict in Gaza, Turkey's president says Israel must be forced to end the war.
To end this destruction, Israel must be stopped and forced to accept a permanent ceasefire.
To that end, a number of Arab nations are seeking to isolate Israel by moving to freeze its participation in the United Nations.
A step like this step is what ended, brought down, and eliminated a colonial regime in South Africa.
In the meantime, Hamas has made amendments to a proposed ceasefire deal that could free many of the hostages now held captive in Gaza. The changes were enough to get Israel to send a negotiating team to renewed ceasefire talks. But there are conflicting reports on whether Hamas is ready to agree to a deal without a permanent end to the fighting and all Israeli troops out of Gaza. According to a New York Times report that cited unnamed sources, a number of top IDF generals are ready to give up the war on Hamas if it means freeing the hostages. Netanyahu is blasting the report.
I don't know who those unnamed parties are, but I'm here to make it unequivocally clear. It won't happen.
On July 4th, Netanyahu sent greetings and a message to the U.S. At their base, Israel and America are guided by the same twin insights. Freedom is the most precious gift humanity will ever know, and freedom isn't free. You have to be willing to fight for it. This excavation site, about 20 miles from Jerusalem, is where Dr. Scott Stripling and his team believe they found the location of the biblical tabernacle described in the book of Judges. It's a portal into biblical history, which we first heard about a few years ago. You're looking at the heart of biblical Israel, along the route known as the Way of the Patriarchs. This is ancient Shiloh, the place where the Bible says Joshua divided the promised land between the 12 tribes, and where the tabernacle of the Lord stood for more than 300 years.
Welcome to ancient Shiloh. This is the first capital of ancient Israel, and it's a sacred spot because the Mishkan was here, the tabernacle where people came to connect with God.
Scott Stripling directs the excavation here, and along with dozens of volunteers, they're digging into history.
We're dealing with real people, real places, real events. This is not mythology. The coins that we excavated today, we're talking about coins of Herod the Great, Pontius Pilate, Festus, Felix, Agrippa I, Agrippa II. The Bible talks about these people. We've got the image right there.
That image includes a fortified wall built by the Canaanites. They're finding a treasure trove of artifacts, including coins and 2,000 pieces of pottery a day.
Now this one was from yesterday. It's been washed already. So you see the same form right out of the ground and yesterday. And these are those handles from the stone vessels. Remember Jesus' first miracle at Cana, they were stone jars full of water. That's that ritual purity culture of the first century.
An archaeologist looks at these shards as a fine timepiece.
Just like your great-grandmother's pottery is different from your pottery that you're using today. And once we learn the pottery, then we can use it as our primary means of dating.
Stripling says literally digging into the Bible can change your life.
You can read the Bible, you can walk the Bible, but the ultimate is to dig the Bible. You know, when we actually get into the soil, like these students from Lee University, they're literally, it's under their fingernails and in their nose and their mouth and their ears, and they're exposing this ancient culture. It becomes one with you. And sort of like we came out of the soil, and as we dig into this soil, we connect with God and with each other, I think, in a very important way.
I love getting my hands dirty. I love digging in the dirt. It's my favorite thing.
People from all ages man the dig, with the main drivers being students like Abigail.
It's tiring and exhausting, but it's really rewarding. It's exciting to find ancient things that have been laying in the dirt just waiting for us for thousands of years.
She says the Bible comes alive in the dirt.
I read the Bible totally differently than I did before I came here. And when I read the Bible, I know the places, I know what's going on. I understand it more deeply, especially where previous archaeologists have claimed that the archaeology disproves the Bible. But when we dig here, we find that everything matches. You read it in the Bible, you dig in the dirt, and there it is.
Archaeology doesn't set out to prove or disprove the Bible. What we want to do is to illuminate the biblical text, the background of the text. So to set it in a real world culture, to what we call verisimilitude. So we get an ancient literary description. Now we have a material culture that matches that. Chris, you're sitting where Samuel and Eli and Hannah and these people that we have read about, they came just like us, needing answers, needing to connect with God, needing forgiveness.
He says they dig into the past and find lessons for the present.
One of the faith lessons for us is that God is the potter and we're the clay. And even if our lives are broken, like these vessels are, God told Jeremiah, after he told him to go to Shiloh and see what he had done, he told him to go to the potter's house and look at a flawed vessel and see how the potter puts it back on the wheel and works out the imperfections. So my faith lesson is this, that yes, we're imperfect, but if we'll allow God, he wants to put us on his potter's wheel and he wants to make us a vessel of honor.
Stripling often cites Psalm 102 that says, "O Zion, your servants take delight in its stones and favor its dust."
For me, this is sacred soil. This is where the Mishkan was, which answers that most basic of all human questions, how do I connect with God? And I think everyone watching today, that's their most basic question. I know I'm messed up, and I know that God is holy. How do I bridge that gap when I sin against other people, when I sin against God? And ultimately, Chris, if the Bible is true, then the God of the Bible has a moral claim on our lives. And as we establish the veracity of the biblical text, I hope that everyone watching will just think about that God loves us and he has a moral claim on our lives.
Coming up, excavation director Scott Stripling brings us up to speed on this year's discoveries. Scott Stripling, it's really an honor to be back here in Shiloh. We were here last year. Tell us what's new since last year.
Well, welcome back to Tell Shiloh. You can see that we're making progress. We're getting deeper in all of our squares, and we're working in three main areas. The gate complex, what we believe is the gate complex that we've uncovered outside the city wall, and that's where you filmed with me last year. The monumental building up above, which matches the dimensions of the tabernacle and is oriented in the right direction. We actually found a new pomegranate in the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, if you will, just a few days ago. And then thirdly, we're in this massive bone deposit, this favisa that we've talked about in the past. So we're continuing to go down in these three areas. And, you know, we were excited to be excavating this year. All the other digs canceled, and I just prayed about it and thought about it. And I said, you know what, we're going unless the Antiquities Authority pulls my license, then we're going. And my team said, hey, if you're in, we're in. And so we're thrilled to be here.
Yeah. Tell us why this is so important here.
It matters because God was here. Jeremiah 7:12, go now to Shiloh, God told Jeremiah, where I first caused my name to dwell. See what I did there. And that's what I've come to do. I've come to see what God did here and then to make it known. And of course, you being here today is a part of that story of making known what happened here in history.
And do you feel like you're going back? I mean, you're going back to Joshua and beyond.
I really do. I mean, I look at this. This is what Joshua saw. This is the fortification wall. This is the gate. It was already here when they arrived. And so I do feel like I'm walking in the steps of Joshua and Caleb and Othniel and Achiel and Hannah and Elkanah and Eli, all these people who were here. In a sense, we get really busy working and, you know, it's tedious. But I stop every once in a while and just say, okay, this is really awesome. We're walking in the steps of amazing people.
What's the lesson for us today?
Well, I mean, the faith lesson for me is this, that when we take the biblical text and the material culture, they line up. And that says to me that there is a God of the Bible and that he has a plan for our lives. And so we see that plan sometimes involves judgment. We have a destruction layer here from the Philistines when God allowed Shiloh to be destroyed. But we also see signs of abundance. We see the tabernacle. We see where people came to connect with God vertically and then horizontally with each other. And I think when the viewers see this, if they'll take that away, then that's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, you know, the world is in such turmoil now. Is it a particular lesson for such a time as this?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the world is in turmoil now. You know what? It was in turmoil then. The Philistines were knocking at the gate. They took the Ark of the Covenant, if you can imagine. So this isn't Israel's first crisis. And we see it in the material culture here today. We have a crisis going on around us right now. And in the midst of that, we're trying to be a light, trying to be a blessing. And we know that God is sovereign and he's going to work through all of this.
Yeah. Tell us about the tabernacle. How much have you excavated there?
Well, we began to excavate this building of the tabernacle in 2017. 1 Samuel 3 says that the temple of the Lord was at Shiloh and the doors of the house of the Lord. So we start getting language that indicates something other than a tent was built here. Then the Mishnah tells us in two places that there was also a permanent building with a tent over it. And that's exactly what we begin to uncover here. We have a large building, monumental in size. It survives to 3 meters in height, which is about 12 feet or so in height. It's 25 meters long, 12.5 meters wide, divided on 2-to-1 ratios like the tabernacle, and it's east-west.
Any final thoughts, Scott?
Well, I just want to remind myself and remind you and the viewers of what Psalm 102 says. Blessed are those who love your dust and cherish your stones. And we do, and I know your viewers do also, and there's a blessing for those of us who come open-minded with an open heart to God and to his world.
Up next, a walking tour of the excavation site at ancient Shiloh.
Well, Scott, what are we seeing here?
You're coming into the entrance of ancient Shiloh, and this is the gate that we have uncovered. And you can see here these massive pillars, Chris. Those have survived to their original height. Now, can you see the niche in the wall there above that pillar? A beam went across that, and I know this because I put one in, and it sits right on top of those. They've survived to their original height.
So this would have been the entrance to Shiloh?
So this was would have been a roof coming across here, so people would have entered from over here, gone through these pillars underneath this roofed area. So this is the outer gate chamber. Yeah. So you've got a market going on out here, basically. People are buying and selling, bartering and so forth, socializing. When you go through into the inner gate, this is where you encounter the elders, for example, and you know, judgment is meted out on the gate and so forth.
Would this be where Eli was?
So I'm sure Eli spent a lot of time here, but where he was in the stories we read about in the Bible, if we're correct about this being the gate, would have been that chamber right there. Inside this inner gate is that inner chamber.
Can we walk up there?
Yeah, let's do it. So this is you can see the symmetry here. Notice how this steps down like this. This is an opening in this wall and a threshold. So this is what we would call the inner gate. So let's go through the inner gate. So we come through here, and now you can see that it opens up, and we have these large ancient walls. and here is an inner chamber within the inner gate. So we would surmise that perhaps a ruler or Eli or someone like this would have sat here in this area. We have a destruction layer. You can see how that burn layer is beneath there. Yeah. And then behind us, you can see the two phases in the wall, the very large stones and then the smaller ones on top of that, which is a later phase, which blocks what I think is the original entrance into Shiloh.
So Eli would have been here, and this might have been where he was when he got the bad news?
Well, last year I asked you to sit down right there, and I asked you, what do you see? And you looked out and you said, I see the Patriarch's Highway. And I said, you got it, okay? So he's looking out and he sees the runner coming from Afek, 26 miles away. So the situation on the ground, what we call verisimilitude, fits very, very nicely with the biblical text.
Wow. Where we go next?
Okay, let's go up to the monumental building, what we believe is the tabernacle building. Okay, so this is the pathway, Chris, where I came back in 2016 and walked down here, and all this was underground, and I walked up and drove the first stake to begin the excavation here.
It's amazing.
Not knowing that I was walking through the gate and staking where the monumental building was.
What are we going to see right now?
Well, this is what you came to see. This is why people came here, why Jeremiah came here, to see the building of the tabernacle. And if we're right, this building right here, this is your northern wall, that's your western wall across the back. So this wall, Chris, is parallel with that back western wall. And if we're right, then this area right here would have been the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant would have been for over 3 centuries.
When you realize that, what do you think? What do you feel?
Well, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And right where Melody is sitting is where that pomegranate was found just a few days ago, this miniature pomegranate.
When you say pomegranate, are you talking something metal or?
It's made of faience. It's a type of precursor of glass, if you will, perfectly preserved through our wet sifting system. And that's right where it came from, in the center of the, if you will, the Holy of Holies.
So why is the pomegranate so important?
Well, the Bible says that the priest had on the hem of their garments, they have bells and pomegranates. And so it's the third one that we have found in association with this building.
My understanding is that when they went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur, if perchance the high priest died, the pomegranates would stop ringing.
That's what we believe, yes.
Yeah.
And when they would come out, of course, they would come across this threshold, and then across our path, this is from our area H to our area K, and then over here we're unveiling right now the rest of the wall of the building. So 25 meters long, 12.5 meters wide. You see where the sun's rising? That's east. What's the direction of this building? East-west. So that's what the Bible says the tabernacle was.
Wow.
Now, the two more pieces of the puzzle. Number one, storage rooms all across here where you would store, logically, the tithes, okay? People are not able to go to tabernacle.org and make a secure online donation. They've got to bring commodity. And then the final place I'm going to take you is on the eastern edge of the site to our favisa, our massive bone deposit from the time of the biblical sacrificial system.
Should we take a look?
Let's go.
Still ahead, the favisa, the site of ancient bone deposits left over from ritual sacrifices.
So this is our Area D. It's the eastern edge of the site. And back in the 1980s, Bar Ilan University excavated here at Shiloh for 4 seasons. We're actually the third major expedition here. Ours will be much longer and more expansive than the previous ones. But they uncovered this favisa, this sacred bone deposit, excavated part of it. Now what we've done with our better technology a generation later, we're coming back and finishing this area and analyzing the finds, and it's phenomenal what we're finding. We have in total about 20,000 animal bones that are going to come out of this big bone deposit here, and mixed in with those animal bones are vessels, whole restorable vessels. So you not only bring your animal to sacrifice, but then you give a drink offering, a libation from a chalice or a sacred bowl. It's poured out, a drink offering, and then the vessel is broken because it also has value. On a daily basis, we'll see a thick layer of bones and then a thick layer of pottery on top of that. And it's very rare that we get restorable vessels elsewhere, but here many of these vessels we can put them back together as if they were broken intentionally. So this is a really interesting area, because if you think about the purpose of the biblical sacrificial system, it's so that people like us, people like Hannah and Elkanah, could come and reconnect with God vertically and reconnect with each other horizontally through the shedding of blood. So let's step down into the epicenter of the favisa. So right here where you're standing now, underneath your feet, is about this much unexcavated bone.
All right here.
All under your feet. And I know because we excavated this part already and we backfilled it for now, but where you're standing is the epicenter of this favisa. These silos right here were cut into it in a later period, and then bones and pottery were scattered, but then part of it was not cut into. And so next season we'll get to this area where you're standing. So you must come back next year and see this. I mean, it is going to be boxes and boxes, thousands of bones, and each one of those bones meant something. I mean, somebody brought that because they wanted to honor God, they wanted to connect with God, and they wanted their sins atoned for, to be covered.
And we're talking about, last year you were telling about what side of the animal was here.
Okay, so we're finding disproportionate number of bones from the right side of the animal as compared to the left side of the animal.
And why is that significant?
Well, as a Bible reader, I think of Leviticus chapter 7. The right side of the animal is the priest's portion. And as we, we'll see if those numbers hold up as we finish this, but for now, that's a really, really interesting development.
John the Baptist talked about the rocks crying out. Do you feel like they're crying out right now?
You think he had problems? I've got more problems. Not only rocks are talking to me, I've got bones and pottery and flint, objects, gold. I mean, all these things are talking to me.
What are they saying?
They're telling me a very consistent message that you can trust the Bible. You have an accurate biblical text, and we find a great verisimilitude or consistency between the material culture and the biblical text.
And why is that important in these days?
Well, I just think the Bible has gotten a bad rap in many people in many places. It's almost like it's guilty until proven innocent. I'm not asking to slant the field in my favor. I'd just like to have a level playing field. And if people have been told that archaeology contradicts the Bible, it's just simply not true. And we can see that here at Ancient Shiloh.
Any final thoughts?
Well, I just want to encourage those who are watching today to read their Bibles. If they're not sure where to read, they can start in 1 Samuel and read about the stories that take place here. And remember that there is a connection. They're reading actual people, places, and events.
Well, that's all for this special edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to know more about this amazing excavation, you can go to digshiloh.org. Maybe you can join this or others like it. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.